identity statement is your statement of who you want to be. It's not the description of who you are today, it's who you want to be tomorrow. And the more clear that is in your mind, because remember, it's your belief. It's how you think and believe, and what you think and believe about yourself that's going to govern your behavior, and your behaviors are then going to lead to the results, and the results are going to confirm your beliefs. But it starts with belief, and so you have to start with, what do I believe, or what do I want to believe about myself? What do I want to believe is true? What do I want to become? And you got to write it and articulate it and make it vivid and clear. Because remember, the chasm you're trying to cross is right here. The difficulty is at the beginning, when you write a belief statement about yourself that's not true, but represents who you want to believe, who you want to be, then there's this chasm of my behaviors, first of all, my results certainly don't show that. And secondly, my behaviors don't indicate that. It's okay. It doesn't matter. When you are writing your identity statement, you are capturing and crystallizing the you that you want to become. And the more clearly you do that and the more powerfully you do that, then all of a sudden your behaviors will start to be the outcome of that belief. And then the results will follow. So don't limit yourself to remember we talked about functional fixedness. And how we tend to only see the value of our past. We tend to only see the past, we don't see the future because we suffer from functional fixedness. And when you write your identity statement, the propensity is that you will suffer from functional fixedness and you will only try to describe the you that is the most predictable, that is the ultimate outcome of the inertia of your past. Don't. Your identity statement is the you that you want to be. And then your objective should really start to become the expression and results of those beliefs. So that's how your identity and your objective, your purpose work together. What you will find as you go through the Purpose Finder assessment, what you'll find is that the identity of who you are, because that's who you are inside, that is a deep internal, that's you. Remember, you existed for tens of thousands of years, long before you ever came to Earth. And there is a you that is inside of you that is this ancient, wise, incredible person. That's the you that you're trying to uncover and peer through the darkness to explore and write about when you capture this. And then what you'll find is when you go through that Purpose Finder assessment, you'll find that you're really attracted to the behaviors and the results that are the expression of the beliefs about you. That's one of the ways that you start to know that your purpose is in alignment, because your objective or this path will start to look like the ultimate expression of the you that you are identifying. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense? All right. Remember that when you're putting down your purpose, when you're working on your objective statement, in business, they teach this concept that is a beautiful principle for not just business, but for everyone. So what they teach is that the secret to relevance as a business, as a person, is to not fall in love with a solution, but to fall in love with a problem. So Kodak is a really good example of this. So Kodak, they led the industry, had the best camera forever. You guys are probably like, who's Kodak? The young people are like, well, Kodak. Kodak had the very best camera ever, and they led the market. They had the vast majority of the market share. They fell in love with their solution, though. They fell in love with their camera, and the whole digital photography industry just totally passed them by because they didn't fall in love with the problem. The problem was, how do we capture memory? How do we capture memories? And how do we, immortalize them? That was the problem. But what they did is they fell in love with the solution. When you're writing your identity statement or your purpose statement, try not to capture a solution. By that, I mean don't try to capture a destination. Don't try to capture an end state. Try to capture this is the problem that I am most passionate about solving. This is the cause that I find it's worth fighting for. This is the thing that I am meant to do in life. And the more you make it about a problem that you're trying to solve in the world, and the less you make it about a solution, the more aligned you will be. Because what happens is when you identify an end state, a destination, instead of a problem that you are passionate about solving, then you end up becoming too committed to a path. Too committed to a path. And then you fail to move on quickly enough. So fall in love with a problem, not a solution. The next thing is to remember that what we're trying to do is just identify a direction. You're not trying from here or here. You're not trying to say, what is this? Or what is this? You're trying to identify, what is this? What is the direction? Where is the warmth coming from? As I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about all of the universe of opportunities that I can pursue in life, it's like, oh, I'm getting like, that feels warm, and that's the direction I'll go. That's the problem I'm going to commit to. That's a direction I'm going to commit to. You're not committing. You're not trying to see what this is or this is or this is. Maybe you'll catch a vision of what this is. If you're here, maybe you'll start to see that. It's more that you're committing to moving in this direction. And then as you move in that direction, you'll start to catch visibility of opportunities. So remember, we talked about how in business school and MBA school, they teach about the COP model, which is competency, opportunity, and passion. And you have to find something that you're good at, that you're passionate about, and that there's an opportunity to do. And that is where you're in perfect alignment. That's your sweet spot. As you start to move forward, you'll start to recognize opportunities to do things that you're good at and you're passionate about, or that you're passionate about but you're not yet good at, and then you focus on growth because now you have a focus and a direction for your growth, for making mastery and progress. And then as you just start to move forward, you have this momentum, you have this sense of I'm moving forward, and then you catch visibility of the next objective, and then you can orbit that objective. But right now you're only trying to get a sense of like, what is the direction that I'm supposed to be heading? Now we get to alignment, and alignment really is trying to answer the question like, what is my path and how do I stay on it? What is my path and how do I stay on it? Because the problem is, like, there's just this universe of opportunity. There's just so much stuff, and there's so much minutia and so many things to do, and it's so easy to sort of get pulled from our path. And so that is the question that alignment tries to answer. And so the question is, how do we get off course? So let me ask you guys, how do you get pulled off course? What is the way that you most get pulled off course? Has anybody had yes, Ryland? Okay, discouragement. I love you and that you said that first. Okay, so discouragement. I'm going to put it up here. I'm going to get different color actually. Okay, I'm going to do purple. Is that purple or is that blue? I'm going to do blue. Discouragement. So this is really interesting. Why discouragement? Why is discouragement? First of all, raise your hand if you can empathize with this as one of the gravitational pulls that pulls you off path. So why? Why is this such a universal? Why is discouragement such a universal distractor?
Rusty. I think that's one of the adversary's biggest tools is to get us discouraged. Because if he can get us discouraged, then he knows that we will get off the track to our objective and to our righteous desires. So I think that's a big one.
Thank you. You are absolutely right. So listen, like these true principles, the beautiful thing about true principles is that when you understand a true principle, not only does it give you power in your life, but it gives you power to understand how the adversary works. And if this is a true principle, then where do you think he's going to attack first? He's going to attack right there. He's going to attack like, what do you believe about yourself? he's going to attack he's going to make you feel like you're not, like everything comes down to identity. So it's funny because this is one of my favorite stories ever. Shandon's not here, and it's too bad because he's my son. He's now 100 years old. Feels like he's like 17 now, I guess. When he was maybe 10, I remember it was one morning I was making breakfast, and which is rare. Usually don't make breakfast, but I was making breakfast, which makes me sound like I'm an awesome dad, but I really don't do that very often. So I'm making breakfast, and I like drop an egg or something. I can't remember exactly what I did. But I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. And Shandon, as a 10-year-old, was sitting there at the table, and he looks at me and he stops and he's like, Dad, total straight expression. He says, Dad, you're not an idiot. You just act like an idiot. And I was like, wait, like, what do you mean? Like, what is that? What do you mean by that? But I love that sentiment because it's funny. When we make mistakes in life, our first conclusion is an identity accusation. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart. I'll never be able to do this. I'll never be able to change. I'll never be popular. I'll never be the smart. I'll never, like, whatever it is, like when we fail, the first thing we default to is an identity accusation. Attack. We attack our own identity. It's the strangest thing because this is what Satan defaults to. Like if he can attack, right? So let me get real for a minute. Did anybody realize, okay, some of you recognize, because I got emails from many of you, you're like, when are you going to post the video? Can I tell you why? One of the reasons what took me so long to post the video. So I have Tourette's. Has anybody noticed yet? Yes. When you watch the video, you'll notice. So my family, usually when I'm in public, it's very controlled. But when I'm at home, like you just ask any of my family, they always know when I'm stressed because my body goes crazy. It does all of these wacky things. And when I watch the video, and I always I obsess over this because man, I'm a public speaker. That's what I do. And I go get on stage and I'm like, how can I be a public speaker? I have Tourette's. And I think I can't do that. I'm not no, I can't. And I start to worry that I'm going to get up there and I'm going to just look like a moron. So I looked at this video and I'm like, and it hurt. And I was like, no, I cannot post this. Now you're all going to go look at the video like, oh, I see it. But, it's funny because the first thing we do is we look at our insufficiencies and we believe that they are cause for us to not continue our course. Did I tell the story of Moses and what's in your hand? I did tell that story? Okay, good. And David, did I tell the story about David? So David, I love this. So David, he walks up and to the Philistine army and to the Israelite army to bring some food. And he's like, and he sees this Philistine, this hairy, ugly, BO-ridden Philistine. And he's like, what are we? And the Philistine's like, come on and fight me, send one person. And the whole army is like, no, we can't. And David's like, what is happening here? And he's finally like, I'll take care of this. And he goes and he grabs some stones and he walks out and he whacks the guy on the head with a stone. That's usually the story that we know so well. But what we don't focus on is what happened several chapters earlier where David is in the field and he's in the field herding his sheep, and a bear comes up. And he's like, crap, like a bear. And he takes his sling and he slays the bear to protect his sheep. Then he's out herding his sheep and a lion comes up. And he's like, oh, not this again. And he kills the lion with a stone. And now David could have been like, seriously, I don't know any other shepherd that has a lion and a bear, and you give me both. He could have been like, whoa, poor me, I'm a victim. But instead, when he goes and he shows up at this army, he's like, you guys are like, I killed a bear and a lion. It's a sweaty Philistine. It's no problem. And he goes and he kills them. We will always tend to dwell on our own inadequacies. We will always tend to attack our identity. We will always tend, like, I love the story. I'm going to be vulnerable. God, I'm so vulnerable today. Okay. You guys are going to think this guy is, I'm so weird, which I am. I was at the gym the other day. So I love my gym workouts. Not because I work out, but like I get so much inspiration at the gym. There's two places I get inspiration, at the gym and in the shower. So I'm like, I spend a lot of time in the shower and at the gym. Like, I just believe these are the best places. So I'm sitting there at the gym, and all of a sudden on my workout track, I know you're going to think I'm an idiot, Little Drummer Boy comes on my workout track. And I love this story of Little Drummer Boy. It's like he shows up to the birth of a king, and he looks down and he's like, I got a drum. And it's a king, but like, I got a drum. And so he looks at Mary and he's like, should I just play my drum? And Mary's like, yes. And so he does, and he makes music. Listen, I want you to know that whatever you have been given in life, it's enough. And the first thing you'll do as you start to identify your purpose and your direction is you'll start to feel inadequate. I'm not strong enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not, whatever it is. You will feel like you're not enough because Satan attacks our beliefs. Just know that that's hogwash. It's not true. It's false. It's a lie. Whatever you are trying to accomplish, you are enough. You have been given enough. Trust in your identity. Force your identity to become your behaviors, and everything else just follows. Okay, what else pulls us off track? Yes.
I think kind of along with discouragement is, I guess when we get discouraged, we get some of those feelings of, feeling inadequate or feeling like some of those things that you talked about. So we make excuses, is what I would say. We try to blame other things, other circumstances, other people, other situations to kind of suppress those feelings of discouragement. And so we don't put it all on us.
Yes. So this principle is called yes, you did. Confirmation bias and assimilation.
Or the Kimball principle in my mind.
That's right. Which is this: the moment you believe something, you will start to look for confirmation of that belief. Otherwise, what happens is what's called cognitive dissonance. These are powerful principles that we'll talk quite a bit about. So cognitive dissonance is this state of mental and emotional anguish that we feel when our current state is not what we believe it should be. The perfect story for this is in the Aesop's fables, the fox and the sour grapes. Do you guys remember the story of the sour grapes? So he goes up there, and then the fox is like, oh my gosh, those grapes in the tree. Like, do grapes grow in trees? Like, I didn't know grapes grow. But anyway, he's like, the grapes in that tree look so delicious. So he jumps and he tries to get him, and he can't get him because he's not tall enough, and he's a fox. So finally he sits down and he's like, those grapes are sour. So we do this. So as soon as we have a belief, we will look for things that confirm that belief. And we will assimilate information in a way to confirm that belief. So the moment you start to believe I'm inadequate, you'll find all kinds of confirmation for that belief. You'll find ample evidence. It'll surface everywhere, and you'll be like, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. And all of a sudden, we're a victim. You have to build up, like part of being someone who is successful in life, part of being someone who is able to reach and sustain levels of individual excellence is building up this internal, emotional, and mental resiliency where you're able to be like, I don't care what the behaviors are. I don't care what the results are. I don't care what my environment says. I don't care what the outcomes are. Like, I believe, and that's enough. Because if I believe hard enough and strong enough and long enough, I know that the outcomes are going to change. That's a great one. Kimball principle. Anybody else? What pulls us off out of alignment.
It's nice to meet you. Good luck.
Yes, Tim.
Mine is laziness or like lack of willpower or something like that.
Yeah. So there's Angela Duckworth. Don't you love that name? Angela Duckworth. She wrote a book called Grit, and which is the word that she uses to describe this. Like, what is it about some people that gives them a stick-to-itiveness, like a level of grit and fortitude and perseverance that allows them to sustain energy towards a cause? We're going to talk a lot about that right now, because I genuinely believe from my research after over 20 years is that it's our ability to sustain energy towards a cause that ultimately leads to our success. This is what differentiates someone who is successful in life from someone who has a big dream and then they go take a nap and fall asleep and then that's as far as they go. They had a dream. Like, our ability to sustain energy is critical to our success. But the problem is this little bugger, this principle. Anybody tell me what entropy is? Ricky?
Isn't it if you don't use something,
Yeah, it's basically use it or lose it. Like it's this principle of physics that says that all things tend towards disorder. So entropy is what happens when my kids come to me and they're like, "Dad, can you help me with math?" And I'm like, no, I can't. Like, no. Entropy is what happens when I go down and I look at Shandon's room. I'm like, entropy. Entropy is what happens whenever we, like anything that is valuable is perishable. It suffers from entropy. Relationships tend to suffer from entropy faster than anything else. If you are not actively investing in sustaining and maintaining relationships, they entropy. Personal progress is the same way. Knowledge is the same way. It is a fundamental law of the universe that all things suffer from entropy, and therefore, if you know it, you can play defense against it. Because you just have to recognize that if you're not actively investing in something, that's the principle of investment. If you're not actively investing, it's going away. Whatever it is. So the things that you value the most, man, you have to just sustain your investment. Because otherwise, entropy will take it away from you. We'll talk more about entropy, but do you remember this? The Gartner hype cycle, which was the illustration of entropy, which is that, we start something, anything, and then we immediately have this peak of inflated expectations. The moment you set your purpose, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to change the world tomorrow. And then it's going to be like, oh, this is hard. And this is where Tanner's comment comes in, where it's like a lot of people get to this and they quit. In fact, organizational research has been done to show that most people right now are quitting around the 6-month to 12-month mark, because that's when, in an organization, they hit this trough of disillusionment. In their employee journey, they start and they're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. And they're like, nope, this sucks. My boss sucks. My work sucks. Everything sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the same with businesses. That's like been shown that most businesses usually collapse around 10 years, but
That's
if
right.
they can push through that 10-year mark, that's where they start seeing results.
That's when they start growing. And it's the same with relationships, with divorce. And so it's our ability to get out of this. But the problem is this right here, this reaching this slope of enlightenment to get to the plateau of productivity, that takes investment. That takes effort. That doesn't happen. This happens naturally. This happens naturally. This is by sheer brute will. I am going to get out of the trough of disillusionment and reach the plateau of productivity. And that just takes the ability to sustain energy. And you stack enough of these cycles end over end, and it just looks like a heartbeat, because that's what this is. This is just life. Everything is going to have these peaks and these valleys, peaks and valleys. So the first thing that this should teach you is that when you're in a valley, don't hyperventilate. Don't throw in the towel and give up. You're just in a valley. Like, it's okay. Everybody's in a valley. Everybody goes in a valley. And when you're on the top of the mountain, guess what? You're on the top of a mountain, and it's going to be awesome and glorious. You're going to feel like you can conquer the world. But guess what? You're not going to stay there. It's okay. Life is just peaks and valleys. Just knowing that gives you this ability to just have some fortitude and resiliency. Because otherwise, when you don't have that perspective that this is what life is like, then all of a sudden you have like one of these trough moments and you're like, I'm going to die. Like, I don't know how I'm going to persevere this. And it throws you way off. Don't let it. Like, just don't let it. You will hit a trough. It's okay. You'll also get out of it. You just have to keep going. The key to continue to go is that we have to install these normalization processes to equalize our peaks and reduce our valleys. These processes that help us normalize. Have you ever met those people in life that just feels like they're just going, and it's like they don't seem like they're just tossed about by, they just feel like they just keep going no matter what. Well, guess what? They do have peaks and valleys too. But they've learned to normalize those peaks and valleys so they don't hyperventilate. In fact, it was funny because someone went up to, not Steve Jobs, he's dead, Tim Cook the other day, and they're like, he just had this big announcement, and they're like, and the stock tumbled, and they're like, what are you going to do? What are you, like, how do you feel about this? And he's like, oh, did it go down? And they're like, it's your stock, like, you don't know. And he's like, it goes up, it goes down. I don't hyperventilate. I just create value. And so I thought that was a great statement. It's like, we just need to normalize our lives. So let's talk about this normalization process and how do we govern that? Really, it's this idea that, remember, like, we're on this big journey and it's messy. And if we don't normalize, then we just end up nowhere. But ultimately, what we're trying to do, if you remember this, is we're trying to sort of hone in. We get better and better and better as we learn where we're going. And each of these orbits, we're going to deconstruct those a little bit more today. I'm kind of going to move fast. Let's go back to this view, though, because I love this idea of all of this universe of opportunity that's out there, all of this stuff to do. And the idea is, there we go. And the idea is we have to start to figure out, like, what are the things that we're not interested in? What are those boundaries? And in order to do that, we have to create feedback systems in our life. We have to create feedback systems. Every successful endeavor relies on feedback systems. An organization, a relationship, an individual, like, there are these feedback systems. You have to be able, it's been said, what gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed gets improved. It's impossible. It's like naive to think that I'll ever improve something that I'm not measuring. It's this idea of feedback, and this is true with relationships. It's true with our personal progress. It's true with everything. It's like, if you aren't measuring it, don't expect it to get any better. What gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed gets improved. And so we have to start to create these feedback systems where we know, am I getting off course? That's what alignment is all about. We need to start to know, am I going in the right direction? And that's what sort of these lateral or vertical pressures are. Am I going in the right direction? We need to be able to know, because we've gone through this purpose finder assessment. We need to be able to know that, you know what? Yeah, like, I look over here at this, or maybe it's over here, and it's like, you know what? It looks awesome, but I've just learned that that's not for me. So I'm not going to try to waste my time to go there. But you only know that if you've installed these. And then the second is, am I getting there fast enough? And that's this horizontal. And by the way, that's what velocity is. That's where state velocity comes from. Velocity is two things. It's speed and direction. And so one of the primary ways that I measure myself is I ask two questions, and I'm relentless about asking these two questions. Am I going the right direction? And am I getting there fast enough? If all you do is ask yourself those two questions on a regular basis, you will have installed in your life an incredibly valuable feedback system. It doesn't answer all the questions. It doesn't tell you, if you answer no, it doesn't tell you why, but all of a sudden you have feedback. Because otherwise, in the absence of feedback, you get something that we'll talk about. So there's three primary rules when it comes to implementing a feedback system in anything, in your business, in your life, in a relationship, in whatever. Number one, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Don't try to go berserk. We're going to talk more about this when we get to SCORE, the science of measuring progress. But the idea is, number one, like, keep it simple. It's so easy to be to fall victim to like wanting to just like keep track of everything. I want feedback from everything, but then it just becomes noise. It gets diluted, and it's like it's just too much. So keep it simple. So my recommendation on that, the takeaway, is that for the most part, focus on velocity. Just ask yourself simple questions. Am I going the right direction, and am I getting there fast enough? Because sometimes this will be right, but sometimes you might have stalled in your personal progress. And you're like, yeah, I'm going in the right direction. Like, this was the right thing, but now I've been doing this for a long time. And I'm actually no longer, moving forward. Or it may be, that you're going fast enough, but you're no longer going the right direction. So it's the combination of these two questions. Because here's what happens when you don't measure. And that's the second principle. The second principle is it's less important to measure a lot of things, and it's more important to measure frequently. Because what happens is you start in your intended direction. Like, you'll have one of those moments of clarity that we talked about last week, where it's like you have climbed the tree or the mountain, and you're looking out, and you're like, you see the grand panorama, the vista of life, and you're like, that's exactly where I want to go. And now I'm going to go there. And so you climb down and you start to go through the swamps and all of the foliage, and it's like you get lost. And eventually and inevitably your direction starts to deviate. The problem is, if you have no feedback system to know that, then you'll just keep going that direction. You'll just keep going and going and going, and all of this in between is just waste. It's waste of your life. It's waste of the value you could have been producing had you have been pursuing your purpose. And so the idea is frequency matters most. But we tend to take to the things that matter the most in our lives, we tend to be the least frequent about measuring. Am I going in the right direction? Am I getting there fast enough? How are my relationships? How is my, where is my growth? Am I finding meaning? Am I having an impact? We tend to not measure those things that matter most, and we need to measure those most. So frequency, because you have to be aware of what's called the normalization of deviance. So the normalization of deviance is a principle in behavioral psychology that talks about, and organizational, it's common in organizational psychology, but what it talks about is that if you allow a deviant behavior to go unchecked, it becomes normalized. And now there's a new standard of deviance. And you'll drift farther against, and if you don't run into a guardrail, then that standard becomes normalized. And now there's another level of deviance, and you'll just keep drifting until all of a sudden you are somewhere. You over here thought, I will never allow myself to get over there. I will never get over there. But we don't start from here and leap to the side. We allow the normalization of deviance in our lives. We allow it in the systems within which we operate. Organizations do this all the time. This is why, what was the big, when the financial crash, the big firm, the big banking firm. Anyway, that was a classic case study in the normalization of deviance, where they committed all of this fraud until the whole firm, like this is one of the hugest firms, had to be shut down because they normalized deviance. If you allow deviant behavior to go unchecked in your life, it will become normal. And now there's just a new level of deviance. So we have to measure often and correct quickly. The next thing you have to be aware of is inertia, because the longer, this is a true principle, the longer you go in any direction, the more momentum you have in that direction. It's all inertia that must be overcome to ultimately change your direction in the future. And so the faster you correct, the easier it is, because you don't have that much inertia. But we tend to be carried forward in life by the inertia of our past. And so the sooner you can identify that you have gone off course, whatever off course looks like, whether it's I've deviated from my value structure, or it's I've deviated from my purpose or my mission, whatever it is, like the faster you recognize deviance or that you've deviated from course, the faster you correct it, the easier it is to correct. But the longer you wait, it gets really hard. It's really hard to course correct when you're over here because you've got to travel all of this distance. But it's so easy when you're right there. And then finally, there's this idea of sunk cost fallacy, which we talked a little bit about. We'll talk more about it when we get to investment. But the sunk cost fallacy is, the problem is you get here and now you're like, I've got 10 years of going this direction. I can't stop. Otherwise it's waste. And so now you are like, I'll just keep going. Well, do you like it? No. Well, do you find meaning and fulfillment? No. Well, do you find that you're having it? Like, no. Well, does it align with your identity? No. Is it your purpose? No. But like, I don't want to leave because I don't want to quit or change whatever this is because I have so much invested. Measure often, correct quickly. Alignment is an ongoing process. The takeaway. Alignment is an ongoing process, and so you have to make it routine. If you want to be an individual who is successful in life, like reliably successful, you have to make measurement a routine. You have to make this alignment assessment a routine. Whatever it is for you. I like to ask myself, am I going the right direction? Am I getting there fast enough? And then another one, which I'll show you in just a minute. But whatever you choose to do to keep score, and we'll get to that, whatever it is, like, you just have to commit to making it a routine. Otherwise, you're going to be just another person who gets off course and allows themselves to drift off course for a month. And then a month turns into a year, and then a year turns into a decade, and a decade turns into a life. We're here to find and fulfill our mission. And so you have to make sure, you have to commit to alignment. And then the final one is this idea, and this is where we'll spend the rest of the lecture time, is you have to focus your feedback systems on fixing the signal to noise ratio. Does anybody know what a signal to noise ratio is? So I used to work at a radio station. I did web design at a radio station, and they were obsessed over the signal to noise ratio because, you build these big towers and you build these translator towers, like the big bubbles on the top of the mountain that look like massive giant golf balls, that are not golf balls, I found out. Those are translators. And what happens is the signal comes from the radio station on the top of the mountain with the copper mine, and it comes over and it hits those, and then it sends it over the mountain to everybody on whatever's over there. So they focus on the signal to noise ratio, because if there's too much noise, then you get distortion. If there's too much noise and not enough signal, you get distortion, and then you can't understand. But in life, what happens is there's so much noise. There's feedback coming from everyone. Like, we're trying to figure out our identity. And we know that this is what gets attacked. And that narrative is being written by other people. It's noise. It's noise in our narrative. All of the times we think, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I can't do it, whatever it is, like, there is noise in our narrative. We have to figure out, when we're looking at all of this stuff, what is noise and what is signal. It's really hard. It's really hard. It sounds easy because you would think that, we would recognize that signal and that's noise, but it's really hard. It's confusing, especially when some of the noise around your identity comes from someone you love. And this often happens because people we love suffer from functional fixedness. They know our past better than anybody else, and so they hold our future hostage to it. So it's really hard when we're trying to create a narrative around our identity and our objective and where we're going to go. It's really hard to filter through the noise and find the signal. And so that's what we're going to focus on. To do that, I want to teach you the principles of escape velocity. There's two primary frameworks that we use. The first is the 16 elements, and we'll tell you how that, I'll show you how that pertains. And then the second is escape velocity. This is the science of gravitational systems. This is how gravitational systems work. Now, I know it sounds really geeky, and it is, and I love it because it's so geeky. But I'm telling you, there is pure magic here. Like when you understand the science of gravitational systems, you have power to architect gravitational systems that pull you forward and escape gravitational systems that hold you back. Here's how it works. We talked last week about start with why, right? We talked about this idea of like you always start with why. It's the why. Why am I doing this? And then the how comes from that, and then the what comes from that. Start with why. So we tend to orbit the why. That's what was one of the things that was captured in this book, is that when we the stuff that we really orbit, there's a reason why we're orbiting it. There's a reason why we're lingering. There's a reason why we play games for so long. There's a why. It's because we're getting fulfillment of these things because we don't get it anywhere else. There's a why. There's always a why. Whenever we linger or orbit an objective or behavior, whatever it is, there's a why. We orbit that why, and we're in this tight orbit. It's what's called an optimal orbit if this is a healthy gravitational system. But eventually what happens is there is what's called a departure trigger. This departure trigger is where all of a sudden something happens. Something happens that sort of sends us off into a more elliptical orbit. It sort of sends us, instead of just being so tight, like if you think about, this being a healthy system. This happens in organizations all the time. An employee will come into the organization and they're totally, absolutely engaged. And then there's a departure trigger, like something happens where now you're disengaged, something like, or if it's you'll set an objective, you'll set a goal, and you'll be like absolutely committed to it, but then something happens and it'll throw you off. And then this departure trigger creates this process of emotional distancing. And a lot of times that emotional distancing has to do with your identity. You'll start to tell yourself a story of like, it's the sour grape story. It's like, I probably didn't want to do that. And you just start to manufacture emotional distance between you and your objective. This is going to happen. You'll set an objective, you'll find a purpose, you'll be committed to it, you'll be in this perfect optimal orbit around that objective, making progress. Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. It's going to throw you into this process, and you'll start to create a narrative around why you didn't really want to orbit that objective, why you didn't really want to accomplish that. And you'll start to go through this process of emotional distancing, and it'll turn into solidifying resolve. And you'll feel this. Like you'll start to feel yourself becoming like, yeah, now you're not just creating distance. You're like, I'm leaving, and here's how. I'm going to stop, and here's how. Like you will start to solidify your resolve to exit the orbit that was once healthy. Finally, if you do nothing, you reach what's called the crystallization of discontent. So the crystallization of discontent is this moment in life. It's this moment in life where all of a sudden the pain of how things are today is great enough to fuel the change needed for tomorrow. It's called the crystallization of discontent. You'll hit the crystallization of discontent, and this, by the way, is when this objective has the least gravitational pull on you. Because now you're out here, like you've become emotionally distant from it. It has the lowest gravitational pull, and this is where you depart from your objective and reach escape velocity. Now, you have decisions to re-engage all along here. And Tanner astutely pointed out how, this takes energy. Because this is the hype cycle, right? You're going to go into this distant orbit, no matter what you choose to have as your objective, no matter what it is. You'll find a time where you're like, I don't quite feel as connected to it as I was. And then you'll start to tell yourself a story. And your orbit starts to get farther and farther and farther. And if you don't make a decision to re-engage, you'll hit that departure, you'll hit that escape velocity, and you won't ever achieve the thing that you were trying to achieve in the beginning. That's the journey of disengagement, but there's a journey of re-engagement where you have a decision to re-engage, and you can go through this process of emotional refueling where you do. And these are all intervention opportunities. This is where we go to leadership. This is where we have to be able to have access to someone who is a guide, someone who can help us, someone who can say, you're just going through emotional distancing. Like, you're just telling yourself a story. It's not that you're actually out of alignment with your objective. It's not that you chose the wrong thing. It's just that you're going through a trough. So get over it. And here's why. Let's figure out why. Like, why are you in a trough? Let's figure out what your departure trigger was. Like, these are intervention opportunities. But if we don't have access to someone to intervene and get us and to re-engage with our objective, we often will never hit it. It's the value of relationships, involving others in our journey, and leaders, because these people will keep us committed. These people will recognize when we start to get into a distant orbit, and they'll be like, I thought you were gonna do X, whatever X was. And you're like, and you'll start to tell yourself that story that Kimball talked about. You'll start to just like, and they'll hold you accountable if they're real friends.
And if they know about it.
And if they know, if you have
They have to
shared.
be involved all along.
That's right. If you haven't shared, they can't help. And this is where we talked, remember we talked about the iceberg last week, and I was like, yeah, we tend to fixate on time and talent, but really it's energy, the bottom of the iceberg that drifts it all up. Well, this is where, according to that book, Time, Talent, and Energy, like, we're only giving 20% of our total productive power. And most of us spend most of our lives in this area. There is massive potential that we have to contribute and make value, to have an impact that goes to waste. This is the waste that we talked about in that. This is waste because we're only delivering 20% of our power because we're not emotionally engaged. We're emotionally disengaged. And this is where most people spend most of their lives. But the people who are successful, who are reliably and consistently successful, these are the people who, number one, have this ability to recognize, and they'll intervene themselves, or they will go to a coach and get help to intervene, and then they will emotionally refuel, and they'll go back into a level of engagement until they hit their objective. So diagnostics, it's this feedback. You have to be able to have diagnostics to know when you're in a journey of disengagement, and then know what to do to treat that disengagement so you can emotionally refuel. And that's where we're going to spend the rest of our time, is on this workshop. And the heart of that, the way that we do that is, of course, it's the 16 elements. Like, the way we stay engaged in something. So you know what creates gravity, right? What creates gravity? Mass. Mass creates gravity. The more mass, the more gravity. The more elements you have active around your objective, the more gravitational pull that objective has over you. Let me state that again. The more elements you have active around your objective, the more gravitational pull that objective has over you. If this is an unhealthy system that you're in, then your ability to sever the elements of that unhealthy system is your way of reducing the mass of that unhealthy system, and therefore reduce its draw. The way to overcome gaming, for instance, is it's like, you know what? A huge part of my identity is derived from the fact that I feel like I'm a level 47 wizard and I'm freaking awesome. And that's a real thing. It's a real value I get from that. So if I want a game to have less addictive power over me, what do I have to do? I have to go manufacture another identity that fulfills that emotional need. And as soon as I have that manufactured, now all of a sudden it's like, I don't need that. The game just got one less gravitational element, has less mass. And I was like, well, this is where I feel like I'm growing. I don't have anywhere else in my life where I feel like I'm growing. But man, in this game, like, it simulates it, it virtualizes it. I have this feeling of progress. I have this feeling like I'm making an impact, and I have relationships with the people that I'm playing with. Like, you start replacing those elements and you reduce the gravitational pull of an unhealthy system. This is the value of understanding gravitational systems and how that works with the elements. Know this: the more elements that are active in a system, the more gravitational pull that system will have over you. For the business people, if you're trying to create an organization that retains its employees, you try to have all of these elements active. You try to make sure that your company purpose and your mission is clear and that people believe in it and they care about it. You tell a story about it. You make sure that everybody that comes in is aligned to do the work that you give them. You make sure that their manager works with them so that they have a plan. They know their way forward, that's never ambiguous, that they have the tools and the means and the needs and the permission and the autonomy and the trust to move forward, that they feel like they're making a difference, that you give them value and they find meaning and that they're growing. And this is it's just all the elements. In any system, the more elements that are active, the more gravitational pull that system has over you. So if you're in an unhealthy system, eliminate the elements. If you're trying to build a healthy system, like a family or an organization or an objective, manufacture the elements. And now all of a sudden you create mass and people will orbit longer until you reach your objective. So now we get to the diagnostic. This will be the next tool in the toolbox. The first one was the Purpose Finder assessment. Go take it. Find your purpose. The second is what I call the disengagement diagnostic. And this is what I recommend you do on a monthly basis. You go through a disengagement diagnostic. I'll show you the questions. But what happens is when you go through this disengagement diagnostic, and I'll show you there's a question for every element. And when you ask yourself those questions, you'll begin to find, like if this was true for me, that, wow, I have a low relationships. I haven't told anybody about this objective. That reduces my score of my likelihood to succeed. I also see that, but I do see that, hey, I have a strong sense of where I'm going and I'm aligned to get there. Oh, but my plan is kind of weak. That reduces the likelihood of my success. So we're going to get into this. And the cool thing about this is the cool thing about this, is once you do this, you get to look back. You get to look back and you'll be like, that period of time was one of the most productive and amazing periods of time in my life. And you can go look at this chart and you can see like, wow, I can see why. You'll also start to see which elements matter the most for you. So you start to dial in on your own personal formula. And then you start to overlay those. Okay, there's too much. I'll try to put it on the website. We got to get to the questions. So here we go. We're going to do your very first disengagement diagnostic right now, live. Here's one thing I will say. These might not be the perfect questions for you. They're starter questions. They're not meant to be the ultimate end-all question that you have to ask yourself every month to recognize your likelihood to succeed. Remember, the more elements that are active, the higher your score on each of these elements, the higher your likelihood of success of whatever that objective is that you're trying to orbit. So as you go through these questions, you might end up finding like, that one's kind of like, don't just throw the element away. Find a question for that element that allows you to adequately assess the activation of that element around your objective. Like that's the point. The point isn't here that these are the only questions. The point is find your question, the question that works for you for each element so that you can ask yourself that question on a regular basis so that you can correct a course that you deviate from on the moment you deviate from it or very near unto it so that you don't get that inertia or that normalization of deviance. Okay, so now go through this right now for yourself and you might end up having 2 or 3 objectives. You might have a sense of your purpose, and that's what you're wanting to assess. Whatever it is, figure out something you want to assess. A gravitational system. It could be my organization. It could be, my family. It could be my objective to whatever it is. It could be my job, whatever it is. Give yourself a context, a framework, and then take a moment and ask yourself each of these questions. And as you go, pause and raise your hand and ask me if you have any questions as you go. Otherwise, let's do this real quick.
So
scale of 1 to 10.
Yes. Oh, so sorry. Yeah, thank you. So for each one, you ask the question, and then you rate that answer on a scale of 0 to 10. So 0 is like, no, there's 0, there's nothing. 10 is like, yes, this is as strong as I can imagine it to be. Give yourself a score on a scale of 0 to 10 for each of these questions.
Do we need to write down the question?
You don't need to. It'll be online, so you'll have it. But for now, like let's just do your own assessment. We're going to try to figure out what your personal success indicator or index is for whatever objective you're giving yourself context for. Yeah, you don't need to write the question down because you'll have access to it. Can you guys online see it okay? Because I can zoom in if I need to. You can, okay. How's it going? Any questions yet? You guys done? Need more time?
More time.
A little more time? Okay, a little more time. By the way, organizations pay a fortune for this. So it's nice you guys just get it. You just get it all. It's really interesting when you do this for different contexts, how good it is at predicting the overall health of that context. Again, the more elements that are active, yeah.
So with growth, it says you
Growth.
feel like you were growing personally or professionally.
Yeah.
Should we like pick one or the other?
Yeah, depending on your context. So like, but not always. So like so like for instance, let's say I was assessing my, you know, if you don't have a professional context, then go personal. But then you still have this kind of sense of like, yeah, but I'm going to have a career. Like you have this, and when you take the Purpose Finder assessment, which I'm so excited for you guys to go take this. It's going to be hard, but it's worth it. Take the Purpose Finder assessment. You'll find some good questions in there around that. But yeah, it's just this idea of like, if you are in a pursuit of an objective and you don't feel like you're growing, you're gaining mastery and progress in some way, you will lose emotional energy for that objective. There are often times where an objective is worth pursuing simply because of the growth that comes out of it. And so there are times when it's a balance. You're like, well, I'm going to college and, you know, and like that is a super high one for me right now in college, but I don't really feel like I'm, you know, maybe is like, you know, other ones are small, but it's like, you know what, it's worth it because I'm growing. You also sometimes find a job like this. You'll go get a job and you'll be like, don't love it, but man, the experience is so amazing that it's going to propel me forward as long as I don't stay here for 30 years. Okay, how's it going? Just go and take, and just do sort of a rough one. And now some elements, there were 2 questions. Take the average of both questions. And for leadership, and so in each of these categories, give yourself an average score. And we don't have time to do this right now, but the idea is now go home and like take this assessment and go look at it and ask yourself, does this adequately represent sort of my overriding sentiment around this objective right now? If I'm feeling really disengaged, if I'm feeling like I'm just like, do I notice there's a lot of zeros or ones or twos or threes? And if so, now you have to ask yourself, am I out of alignment? Should I choose to pursue a different direction? Or do I just need to fix the element? If this objective is something that I care about, do I just need to fix the element? Because it could be that what you find is that, wow, you know what? I actually love my job, or I love but I just need balance in my life because I'm losing energy. I just need to restore balance. I don't need to change my objective. I just need to restore balance. Or maybe it's like, you know what? I love what I do. In fact, this plagues a lot of people. A lot of people will have a strong sense of purpose. They'll be perfectly aligned to do that, but something's in their way. And they're like, and I don't know how to remove it. Or there's like, I don't know how to move forward. And so they abandon their objective because they don't know how to move forward. But the interesting thing is at the beginning, like when, and this is the whole point of measuring, is that it gives something that is otherwise ephemeral and nebulous and it lacks edges. It gives it edges, it gives it form so you know how to push and where to pull and how to manipulate it. Because when you just wake up one day and like Tanner said, it's like, you know, it's just like staying engaged is really hard sometimes. And it could be, this helps you find out why. If it's an objective you care about, this helps you identify what's missing. What is the element that is missing? So now you can go focus on it. Or if you can't fix it, because there are times when what you'll find is that your objective is the right objective. Like you'll do your identity and your objective assessment, and you'll be like, it's the right objective for me. It's the right thing for my plan, but I'm not engaged because maybe I don't have, you know, I'm not growing. But it's the right objective. Then you just have to know that so that you can change the narrative. You can focus, you know what? Maybe it's that, like, and people deal with this a lot. They're like, wow, I'm in a job right now that pays really well, but I'm not growing. But because my big objective is that ultimately I want to do this, the trade-off is worth it. The sacrifice is worth it. But now you know what's wrong with the narrative so that you can control the narrative. Does that make sense? Okay. So we'll put this online, and there's a whole bunch of stuff we didn't get to, but here's the final thing. You have to make alignment a routine. You have to make it a core part of your life. So here's what I recommend. And you can do whatever you want to do, but this is what I recommend. Daily, every day you wake up and you review your identity statement, you review your purpose statement, and you review your plan. Next week, we'll talk about plan. And every day you review those, it is absolutely incredible. It's this primacy effect. It's absolutely incredible how powerful it is to start your day by reviewing your identity, your objective, and your plan. All of a sudden you go into the day and you're like, you have just this sense of whether you're doing the right thing or not because you have a context that you have created. Also, what happens is you'll find that like, wow, I thought that was right, but now after reviewing it every day for 3 weeks, it's like, it's not quite. And so you refine it. Next is weekly. Do a weekly review, a self-assessment, a weekly self-assessment. And you know what? I know absolutely that what I'm asking requires you to live deliberately. That's the point. That's the point of life engineering, is that if you know the principles, you can engineer the outcome. The point is to be more deliberate about our approach to living. If you want to be someone who is successful, reliably successful in life, you have to choose to be deliberate about living it. So weekly, give yourself the velocity review, which is, this week, did I go the right direction and am I moving fast enough? And then monthly, go through the full success metric review. The one we just did. Yeah, and we'll put that online so you'll be able to see it. I want to conclude with this, that I try to conclude everyone with. Just know that in your journey, you're not alone. Like, you're not alone. We feel alone, and we try to tell ourselves a story sometimes that we're alone, that no one's on our side, and that we're all by ourselves, but you're not. You're not alone. There is a light that is within you, and it needs to come out. You need to let it out. That light, whatever that light is that is within you, like, just don't keep it suppressed. Let it out. There is a light. There's a reason why you're here. There is a purpose. Find that purpose. Let that light out because the world needs it. Next, you are strong enough. Like, your identity will be attacked. Just know it's going to happen. As much as you know there's going to be peaks and there's going to be valleys, know that you're going to have a time where you wake up and you're like, I can't do it. I'm not strong enough to do it. You are strong enough. You are strong enough to make whatever change that is that you're trying to make in your life. Remember that you get to choose the direction of your life. You get to choose. Don't be a victim. Don't succumb. Don't just subscribe to the inertia of your past. Choose where you're going to go and choose to get there. And then finally, remember that people need you.